Meditation is a practice of centering. Different techniques exist. We can do chanting of sacred mantra, we can do yoga, we can do sacred dance, and there are many other versions. The simplest and universally accepted version that we're looking at today is breathing. Simple breathing, watching the breath. Now, the idea that we have with meditation is to still the mind, to make the mind stop thinking. What happens when we focus the mind on the specifics of the breath and nothing else is that the mind eventually becomes bored with that in its own way. It needs more changes. It's like quicksilver, it's like mercury. It's always restless, the mind. So we're deciding to end that restlessness. And we can't just say, right, stop thinking. It's absurd. What we have to do is to think about something else. And in this case, we're thinking about something which is so uninteresting and repetitive that the mind just turns off. It's got nothing to do. Now, the inclination of the mind is to think about anything at all. And when we're meditating, we will always notice the mind comes in and gets us thinking about something. What we do then is simply return to the breath. So the practice of meditation, certainly at the stage of a beginner, is to do with two things. Concentrating the mind on nothing more than the breath, and when you notice that your mind is distracted and starts to think, concentrating the mind on nothing but the breath. It's that simple. Now, as we breathe, we draw air into the body. There's a sensation in the nose. There's a sensation in various parts of the lungs. The diaphragm moves. Now, these are the things that we focus on. The specifics of the here and now. What is happening is that we breathe in air, we sigh and air is released. Maybe there's a sound, maybe not. Better if there isn't really, it's more refined in that case. We notice the diaphragm movement. We notice the chest movement. There will be peripheral sounds, perhaps traffic or birdsong or central heating system or something. And we just notice that. But we don't think about that. We don't give it our attention. These extraneous intrusions take our attention, and we just notice that we've lost focus and we regain focus. And that's all we're doing. We're regaining focus, and then we lose focus, and then we regain focus. That's all it is. When you're a very experienced meditator, perhaps you can do your meditation and not need to refocus because the mind is actually disciplined enough to stay with the practice. And yet this is a very rare person who can do this. It's a Sufi story about this. The student asks his master, "Master, is it possible to say one repetition of the prayer without thinking about anything else?" And he said, if you can do that, if you can go through one prayer cycle and focus on it completely and just never lose concentration, then you can choose which of my camels you want, the black one or the brown one. And so the Sufi master just moves into a very high state and tries to meditate and gets into the prayer and repeats the prayer. And afterwards the student says, "Well, did you manage to do this prayer without any thinking at all?" The master very honestly said, no, I could not do it. And the student said, well, why? What were you thinking about? The master said, well, I was trying to decide which of the two camels I wanted. What we have to notice when we're breathing in meditation is that the breath is rhythmic. Now that sounds obvious, but it catches, usually. If you have an emotion, it does not hold a perfect rhythm. It catches somewhere. And we have to just not allow that. We just have to breathe in a way which is entirely rhythmic, and we do not hold the breath. In, out, in. There's no holding. That's not as easy as it might sound. So, first thing to do is to make sure your breath is rhythmic. In and out and nothing else. And as we do that, naturally it gets slower. And we want that. So we perhaps allow it to get a little bit even more slow and deep. As we make the breath slower, it becomes deeper. So it becomes unusually long. And actually you can practice to make it longer. It is suggested that there's a relationship, a correlation between the length of your breath, how long it takes to breathe in and out, and how long you will live. Who knows if it's true? Center the breath in your Hara. So the attention, when you actually focus your attention, imagine you are centered yourself in the belly, or it's not really the belly, it's halfway between the solar plexus and the sacral chakra. So it's around the belly. It's called the Hara, this sort of deep sense of your strength of being. And when we breathe in, just imagine the air is being taken to each and every cell of your body. So you imagine the breath, the in-breath, going to the tips of the toes and the fingers and the earlobes and the top of the head. You just imagine your whole body being filled with breath, every cell. And then when you breathe out, imagine that you stretch universally. You fill the cosmos with the out-breath, that there's an infinite reach to the exhalation. That's it. So centered in the Hara, rhythmic, long, slow, deep breaths. Imagining you're filling your whole body, every cell of your body is oxygenated. And as you breathe out, your prana, your life force, reaches everywhere on this earth and all the space beyond. You can keep your eyes open if that's easier for you. I prefer to keep mine closed. It's perhaps easier for concentration if you do that. And it's certainly a lot easier if you share this practice with another person, or better still, with a group of practiced people. And if you're in that kind of group, it can become quite powerful. I've experienced it with a powerful group of meditators, and it's actually difficult. It's a little bit painful almost in some strange way, but that's very exceptional. However, it's generally acknowledged that if you're with 2 or 3 other people, then you'll have a deeper experience. Sit comfortably, keep your back straight. Know that you have to learn how to do it. If you've not done it before, you have to learn. You won't do it immediately. And you might find you need to do it a good number of times before you can really say, okay, yes, I know how to do this. And you will be thinking. You will be imagining that the thinking is just all that you're doing. But I promise you, if you do the practice as I've taught, and you do it every day, in a little while you'll notice something changes. You slip into it. You just find the state of it. And if you can concentrate totally the first 3 breaths, in and out, in and out, in and out, that will be enough to move you into the highest state that you can reach. If you learn to get into these high states, which you probably will, then you can access them quite quickly if you decide to. Don't just sit down and relax from your busy day thinking, oh yeah, that's having a cup of tea. That's not what we're doing. This is not relaxation. It's something else. It's quite a discipline. Now, meditation is not contemplation. They're not the same thing. If you want to contemplate on something, what people call meditating on peace, on harmony, on my relationship, on my state of health or whatever, people say, I meditated on this. Well, let's distinguish between those two things. Meditation is not thinking. Contemplating on something, usually when people say that, they mean thinking about it, or meditating on something. That's usually what they mean too. Now, it is feasible, certainly, to meditate on something if you know how to use the facility of the subtle mind. Let me just discuss the 3 levels of mind. The level of mind which is commonplace, almost totally universal, let's call that the monkey mind. It chatters, it's constantly on the move, thinking about something or other, even when there's nothing to think about. This is the monkey mind, and the purpose of centering through meditation is to slow down that monkey mind until a more subtle version or dimension of mind can be made known to us. It's there all the time, but we can't hear it because of this monkey chattering away. By the practice of meditation, we still the monkey mind, and then the subtle mind operates. Now, the subtle mind doesn't think actively. It can record input passively. It's a receiver of input. So if something pops into your head during meditation, the subtle mind will receive that, will notice that. And hopefully it will not grasp, because as soon as it grasps an idea and wants to think about it and analyze it, that's not the subtle mind anymore. That's the monkey mind coming back. So if you can get yourself into the state of being in a subtle mind, then you're meditating. In that condition, with a little bit of practice, you can just pop the seed of an idea into that subtle mind. It might be a word, relationship, or university, or money, whatever it is you want to get a deeper sense of. And then try not to focus on it, just allow that to be present. And realizations can occur. So this is what I would call contemplation. There is a 3rd level of mind, which is called the very subtle mind, which is kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about in this video. But it's a very high and rarefied state indeed. And at that level we have an overarching view of the nature of reality. We can see shapes and patterns, the flow of energy rather more clearly, and we don't get lost in attempts to analyze and give form to something which is actually beyond analysis and form. like I say, that's the very subtle mind. Now, you can certainly slip into the very subtle mind automatically, as it were, without effort. It does happen, but it's not what we would expect to happen immediately. A further refinement of this practice of meditation would be to introduce sound. The way in which that happens is that we would repeat a sound frequently so that we know what it sounds like. So that when we're doing the meditation, we can imagine hearing it. So this is different from using chanting as a meditation practice. We're hearing the chant in our imagination. This is called a fikr practice. Fikr just means silent in Arabic. So the idea that we can just remember the sound of a mantra and introduce it into our breathing rhythm. And we might typically have two of them. So we would breathe in with one sound, breathe out with another. Let's say, for example, if I was to do a Sufi practice, I might breathe in Allah on the breath and breathe out Hu, Hu on the out breath. So Allah, Hu, Allah, Hu, only very much more slowly and in silence in my imagination. So this is where we move to the next level of meditation, a little bit beyond the beginner's level. And yet, if you have your own mantra, Kyrie eleison perhaps for Christians, or Om Mani Padme Hum for Buddhists, or whatever mantra you might find speaks to you and touches your feelings, you could just try that, moving the breath rhythm and adding the sound in your imagination to that rhythm. So, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison. You just carry on doing that for any length of time in silence. That helps to focus the mind. If you're having a problem with doing the simple breathing exercise, which I've described today, then maybe adding that idea of a mantra will help you to discipline the mind, to focus the mind further. It's certainly a very good place to start until such time as you can become more disciplined about not thinking. I've heard people tell me they have no time for meditation. I'm too busy to do meditation. That makes it really clear that they don't really understand the effects of meditation. Most certainly, assuredly, meditation will create much more time in your life than it takes. It's a really powerful investment of your time. And that's because when you do meditation daily, you become calmer and you make your decisions in a more considered way. And you don't make so many mistakes. And if somebody demands of you something, wants you to rush around for them, that's not what you want to do. That's not what will happen. And you might not do so many things that you used to do. And little by little, but surely, you will find that you become rich in time. So many people think that being rich depends upon having things and money, and yet somebody who has actually made time unending, they have as much time as they need for everything they want to do, and nothing is ever busy, nothing is ever stressful. That's wealth, isn't it? And that can be reached really only through meditation of some kind, and it is reached through meditation. It's pretty much guaranteed as long as you stay with it. Time will be made for your process of meditation, and the more you meditate, the more time you will have. I would say 15 minutes twice a day would be good, but even if you only have 15 minutes every morning, Morning's better than evening, really is. What happens when you meditate? You kind of tune in to the atmosphere, the psychic atmosphere around you. And when life is busy, when people are rushing around and doing transactions and getting things done, they create this mental energy that somehow impacts upon the atmosphere in which you live. Whereas in the morning, early morning, before all that busyness is started, there's a stillness. I mean, possibly the best time of all to do meditation is about 3 a.m. It sounds a bit radical, but if you actually were to get up at 3 o'clock every day, every night, and meditate for 30 minutes or maybe even 15 and go back to sleep, that would be quite a profound experience quite quickly, I would think. Now, if we go further into meditation, the nature of the mantra that we use becomes quite the issue. That's the focus. So, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison might be to do with forgiveness. It might be the attunement of the Christian meditator. Whereas Om Mani Padme Hum might be the Buddhist meditator who wants to experience transcendental reality. And so on. All these mantras have got their own qualities and their own purposes. And so what we do as we meditate more and more, we start to see which of these words that we'd like to use. And not only words, we can also use imagery. One image which is used in Sufism is wine. You imagine a glass of wine, and it actually gives you a kind of a feeling of towards drunkenness, but it's a different kind of drunkenness. It's kind of a spiritual drunkenness, a mystic's drunkenness, but it really works. You get off on it. That's a bit more advanced. It's quite hard to get to that level where your psyche can register the difference between whether or not you're thinking about a glass of wine or a pint of Guinness. That's a more subtle practice.